Back at it here on the Kaufman Corner, a special edition of the Kaufman Corner. With you as always, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. It is time to talk some pitching with the Kansas City Royals, as we are fortunate enough, Rany, to be joined today by the pitching coach, Brian Sweeney, who's going to be with us, a guy that has done remarkable work as the Royals pitching really was the story last year in their great run into the postseason. We will talk about learning new pitches. We'll talk about what Brian's vision is. I remember talking to him in spring training his first time and kind of what he was looking to create. He really has done a lot of that, how he's been able to do it. We'll get into the details of guys changing roles, all the nuances of it. We're talking pitching right here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
This is the Kaufman Corner podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
All right, thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. We're going to talk some pitching here with Brian Sweeney. Very excited to welcome the pitching coach of the Kansas City Royals here to the Kaufman Corner. Mr. Brian Sweeney joins us here in the program. Brian, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Good to see you guys.
It's good to see you, and it's good to be talking after such a fantastic season. Let's start there. I remember discussing, kind of what your vision was. We'll get into what you wanted the pitching of the Royals to be. But I also remember talking back in spring training, we were coming off a season when the Royals had won 56 games. People weren't expecting a whole lot. You guys were talking about competing and contending. And, just to be able to put together the season, you guys made up a lot of ground. I think everybody, and I think even naysayers would have said, well, they're probably better than a 56-win team. But I don't think people thought an 86-win team, one that would barrel through the Baltimore Orioles, one that would give the Yankees all that they could handle in a playoff series. I don't know that anybody saw that. Did you guys see that? And when did you really feel like that kind of season was possible?
I love the good vibes, from those words. There's always belief right from the beginning, right? We had something to prove, and it really started in the the 23 off season, right? When we got together as an organization, and after getting our teeth kicked in, we had to learn something. What are we going to do to get better? What is our process going to be? And Mr. Sherman, JJ, Q, when you get a vision from the top, it's easy to follow. And we brought that into spring training, brought in some new faces. That helped create the environment that a pitching coach can dream of. And then just went and played baseball. Sometimes you got to let these guys go and let them do what they're good at.
So, Brian, it is my role on this show to be the negative Nelly here. So I want to go back 2 years to when you were actually hired.
Okay.
The 2022 Royals, I'll just put out the facts. They were dead last in the American League in hits allowed, walks allowed, fewest strikeouts, most home runs. It was a trifecta that has only been done one other time by an American League team in the last 60 years. That is the situation in which you were recruited to join the team as the pitching coach by then new general manager or new head of baseball operations, JJ Piccolo. I'm curious, what did they have to do to convince you to take the job? And what made you believe that you would be given the resources and the ability to, change not just the results, but the process that would lead to those results?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question, right? It needs to be a fit on both sides, right? Granted, there's only 30 of these jobs, in the whole world. And it's a dream job, a great position to be in, but the fit has to be on both sides. They had to like me, but also, what was I getting from them? How can we work together and build what we were looking for. And that started during the interview process, right? Not only were they interviewing me, but I was also asking questions to find out where they were, on the continuum, where they're trying to grow. What resources did we have? What kind of people did we have? Most importantly, and you learn a lot during the interview process. It's it was quite interesting. It was we spent a long time together, and that's really where it started.
What were some of the things that like you felt like, hey, we have to institute this? We need to change that. Were there any structural things that you came in that you said this is, and you can look back and say, hey, 2 years later, these were really part of the building blocks of what we did to really turn things around?
Sure. The way I see it, I like to combine the experiences of the game, right? All the time that people have been involved in the game, and combine that with innovation and data, right? And you use the data as a tool to help make the players better, right? And I believe that's that was the direction that the Royals wanted to go in. We have really smart people, starting with Dr. Mack, Daniel Mack, in our R&D department, and we wanted to grow in that area. And what it came down to is, right, we needed to throw more strikes. First pitch strikes was a big part of the first year. It was raid the zone was the slogan that first year. It's like, we have to attack the zone, attack it early, get an advantage counts, and then figure out how to put them away. And it's a process, right? And it's a process for, try to tell Zach Greinke to throw a fastball right down the middle. In an all count. That's, not part of his DNA, right? We're able to adjust a little bit here and there with different guys, but the overall philosophy was, right, we wanted to throw strikes, we wanted to miss bats, right? And we wanted to get weak contact. How are we going to do that? How are these pitchers going to learn how to do that? Learn about their strengths, learn about what the hitter is good at. Combine those things and try to build outs. And there's a lot of ways to build outs, and it doesn't happen in a second. As that first year didn't go well, and we had to iterate our process and kind of change things around, but reinforce the non-negotiables. First pitch strikes is never going to go away, right? We want to walk less guys, right? If we want to walk less guys, we got to get better counts. We want to punch more tickets. Limit slug, limit the home runs, right? We want to get to 2 strikes before we get to 2 balls. These are all things that were important to us and that we tracked each day.
I'm curious, real quick. I remember talking to Kevin Seitzer. I used to do pre and post games with before he got back into the game as a hitting coach, and talking about things. And he did hitting with youth. The Mack and Seitz Academy. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Kevin Seitzer and Mike McFarland had a great academy here, and coached and trained youth baseball and everything, and just talking hitting philosophies with them and doing the games and stuff. And then some, slowly big leaguers started reaching out to him, and he had great success in turning some guys around before he got back. And I remember him telling me, I kind of had to break down a wall. Like, guys came to me because they wanted help, and they were, for early on, the first guys that came to him were guys that were like at the end of their rope. He said they were kind of easier because they're like, I feel like my career is over. I'll listen to anything you tell me. He said, then in talking to him later, once he got into being a hitting coach, he was talking to guys that were already having success. He said, guys that are big leaguers, he said, getting them to trust you and maybe break down what they're doing and rebuild it was what he thought was a big challenge. Do you find that to be the case, that, sometimes you've got a guy that, he has some success and it's hard and you're looking at it going, I know you're here, but we can get you to here, but you're going to have to let go of this. Is that one of the big challenges of your job?
Oh, no doubt. And, it's the relationship you have to build. Why should the Seth Lugos and Cole Ragans, and Lucas Erceg, these guys trust me when they first met me? I got to earn the right to speak into their lives. Right. So that takes time. It makes me think about my first year when I was with Cleveland, and back in 2018, right. And I felt like it wasn't until like August that Corey Kluber and Trevor Bauer that were there actually gave me the time of day to talk about pitching. They were always cordial, always nice, but it was like they had to figure out who I was, before they would, let that wall down. And it was the same. It's the same thing in Kansas City. I had to build that relationship, with Brady Singer. I mean, you probably define Brady Singer, to a T right there. It was, he had that nice year in 22. He needed to change a little bit. 23 was a little bit rough, and we needed to make adjustments, and that took time for him to trust us, and the same the other way. So there's definitely a wall that you have to break, and that comes down to, I like to see it as, you got to create the environment for these guys to succeed, right? You provide them information that they can make them think a little bit about things. You have to communicate really well. You have to communicate really well with these guys, be authentic, honest, and consistent. That's what we as a pitching team try to be, and teach. You can learn at the big league level. These guys are hungry to learn. No matter if you have 12 years in the big leagues or if you got none, these guys are hungry to learn. And as long as you put them in the right situation, you speak to them like adults, you have an opportunity to grow with them.
It's interesting you point out that you need that time to get to know a player for them to trust you, because to me, the first inkling, like you said, the first season was a little bit rough. This year we saw the full flowering of the pitching staff, finishing fourth in the league in runs allowed. But the first inkling we had that you guys were maybe onto something special came in 2023, when the Royals acquired essentially a quadruple A pitcher by the name of Cole Ragans for Aroldis Chapman on June 30th, right? And he went to the minors. He came up for a spot start, I think, on July 15th, went back down. He returned to the major leagues on August 2nd. And although nobody knew it at the time, he was, at that moment, probably one of the 10 best pitchers in the world. He has been one of the 10 best pitchers in the world from that moment on. In 6 weeks, not even 5 weeks, he transformed in a way that is, I've been doing this a long time. It's not normal. That's not common. And I'm just so curious, because, even if it's a sample size of one, that is an incredible sample. And I just like to know, what was it about Cole Ragans that made you guys zero in on him in the first place? I mean, yes, he was lefty who threw hard, but there had to be more to it than that. And then what was it you were able to do in the span of barely a month that transformed him from a guy who was on the fringe of the major leagues into a genuine number one starting pitcher?
Yeah, he was ready to blossom. The journey that he went through with his surgeries and with all the injuries that he had, it was what a team effort. It started with, okay, we were going to trade Chappie, and he was great. I enjoyed working with him. But these are things we had to do that season. All right. So who is it going to be for? Kudos to the front office for kind of putting things together, coming up with names, running it through R&D, right? Running it through coaches, doing assessments on the guys to understand who they were at this given point in time and who they could be, right? So that's where it all began, right? There was a bunch of names that we could have traded for somebody else. We landed on Cole, right? And it's like, okay, what are we going to do with this guy? Is this a guy that can help us in the future? And we saw the potential. We saw great potential. We saw that velocity jump, which was exciting. Of course, the injury history is worrisome. It's like, okay, then the medical side comes in. How can we help him on the medical side? Is it strength and conditioning? Is it nutrition? Right? We're using all of these domains to come together with a collaborative effort to say, yes, this is how we can help this guy. And he checked all the boxes for that. And, on our side, on the pitching side, from a delivery standpoint, from what he did in the offseason with Tread Athletics, those guys do a fantastic job in the offseason and in-season training guys and putting them in a really good position to succeed and collaborating with the major league teams to say, yeah, we want to help the player be the best, best he can be. So when Cole came over, it was pretty simple. He was missing a pitch. in his repertoire. And that was the slider, right? He had a cutter, that worked well, decent to both sides. He had the curveball, fastball change played really well. I think he was missing that kind of platoon neutral, breaking ball, the slider. So when he came over, this is where player development, at the minor league level and with us working together, feather in the cap, right? We put a player plan together. This is what we want Cole to do, right? This is how we're going to do it. Dane Johnson, Paul Gibson, in the minor league said, okay, let's execute the plan. He learned how to throw a slider. Wasn't there very long. You saw I think it was against Tampa that he threw, that first time up, and you could see, you're like, all right, he didn't want to go back down, but he was the 27th man. He had to go back. He had to go back down. And it was like, all right, as soon as he pitched in that game, it was like, all right, we need to get this guy back as soon as possible. He went down, kept refining his craft, that inner hunger to be at the major league level and compete was there. He knew he could do the job, and he came and put the trust in his slider and the rest of his repertoire. And man, what a run he had, to finish the end of that season. And then wouldn't you know it, put himself in position to be the opening day starter for the Kansas City Royals this year. Proud of him. I'm proud of the work he's put in, the effort mentally and physically, to be that guy. I don't know. You've probably heard Q say it. He didn't even know if he was going to make the team out of spring training this year. He was wondering, and Q called him in. He's like, Cole, you're going to make the team. You're good. You don't have to worry about it. You don't need to be throwing 99 in live BPs. You're on the team. Actually, you're going to be the opening day starter. You're good with that. So it's just funny. That's where Cole's mind was. He's grinding. He's always looking to get better, and he's not taking anything for granted. So I'm really proud of him.
Listen, I know there's some organizational secrets. We're talking to Brian Sweeney, the pitching coach for the Kansas City Royals. I'm not looking for you to, give away anything that's proprietary right here, but Seth Lugo, there was rumblings that the organization was interested in Seth the year before he went to San Diego, that there's been an affinity for him. I'm just curious, what was it, that you guys saw? How much of it was, JJ was the whole group, the whole pitching part of the coaching staff that did it, and why has that been so successful? He was obviously very good in San Diego, but he went to another level here. What was the whole process of Seth Lugo becoming what was a reliever with the Mets through San Diego and ultimately landing here and getting to be where he's a finalist for the Cy Young Award?
Yeah, that was really exciting, right? At the end of the year, it's like, okay, we have a list of starting pitchers that we'd like to acquire that fit our budget, that fit what we're trying to do as far as a teammate. And we get this list, and, we put guys at the top, and it was pretty easy for me to put Seth Lugo at the top of the list, despite all the great arms that were in in free agency last year. I'm going to say it again. I keep using this. His journey really connected with me. He always wanted to be a starter, right? But the Mets weren't able to do that because he was such a valuable reliever. He did so well in the pen. It's like, what do we do? What do we do? We keep a valuable reliever? But he was also there was a rotation with when DeGrom was there, and, there was some good pitching. So, but he always had that hunger. The multiple pitch types, extremely intriguing to me, right? You just never know what this guy is going to throw. He's got breaking balls off of breaking balls. And, I think he'll say he has 11 pitch types, probably only 9 that are calculated, but it's, he can do anything with a baseball. He's that talented, right? So we had athlete rankings in spring training after we acquired him, and he was at the top of the list. Right. And we were doing competitions in spring training for PFP. He won, of course. Right. So there were some things in there that it's like, all right, his journey, right? What he wanted to be. A man on a mission like that, it's hard to stop. He wanted to be a starter, and he knew he could be one. He wanted to throw 200 innings, and he accomplished all those things. Tell Seth Lugo he can't do something and watch him do it.
So the other free agent you signed last year, Michael Wacha, was one of the things about him that was so distinctive was how much he relied on his changeup and how good it was that he really could get away without necessarily an elite breaking ball. But what was really interesting was he started throwing a slider this year. Right, like if you look at, I'm looking here at Baseball Savant, according to Baseball Savant, he threw 4 sliders in all of 2023. He threw 240, and maybe they're not calculating every single pitch correctly, but the point is, you guys essentially had him start throwing a new pitch, and I'm very curious how the process of that goes, because contrast that to someone like Brady Singer, who that had an elite slider, an elite fastball, but the battle to get him to find a reliable third pitch was something that kind of defined his tenure in Kansas City. And there were times he would throw a good changeup, and there were times he would back away from it. But Wacha seemed to embrace this new pitch. And I'm curious, like, is there a way when you signed Michael, did you already have in mind his arm motion is going to adapt to a slider really well? Is that a conversation you have with him even before you sign him? Or is that something that you work with in spring training? And sometimes you don't even know if a guy's just going to hit upon the grip that just works like right out of the chute. So I'm curious how that process goes.
Yeah, Michael Wacha, both of those guys. When we signed them last year, I went on a 4-city trip to go visit some of the guys, and Wacha and Singer I went to visit, and Seth. In 4 days, it was quite interesting. I literally got off the plane. My flight was delayed. Going into Shreveport, I got off the plane 10 minutes away from the airport, had lunch with Seth and his wife, and went back to the airport, got on a plane to go back home to New York. It was quite interesting, but the conversations start there, right? We signed Seth, and we signed Wacha, and it's you make the phone call, welcome, I'm excited to work with you, but it's like, all right, now I got to get to know this guy. How do I, again, earn the right to speak into their lives? Let me go see them. Let me go make a visit, have some food with some dinner with, if you want to bring, the wife and the kids, absolutely. Just meet the family, get to know each other. And then soon as you develop that relationship, we could start talking about what's next, how we think we can help you. Right. With Lugo, I don't know how many other pitches he can develop, but he probably will find one this year. But with Wacha, that we identified that early on. It's like, all right, there's a piece missing, right? We need something to turn left, for him. He's got the one that turns right, the seam shift changeup, which is, it's a unicorn. The changeup is a unicorn. There's not another one in the big leagues like it. When he clicks on that thing, it looks like a left-handed curveball. Physics can only define it. But when we sat down in Jupiter, we went out to eat. We started talking pitching, and the door was open a little bit to talk about his repertoire. And there, it's like, do you ever think about throwing a slider? And of course, everybody has tried to work with him on getting a slider, just hasn't really clicked yet. And he's very routine oriented in his bullpens, and for good reason. The guy's been doing it a long time, a proven winner, and he showed that this year. But we talked about, we'd love to work on, in certain bullpens, let's, in spring training, let's lock in that slider. We really think this can take you to the next level. And he's tried it before. Some of the grips didn't work. Maybe it was a mental cue or something like that we tried to work with, and again, it's not just me doing it, right? We got Zach Bove, Mitch Stetter, Andy Ferguson, Malcolm Culver, our bullpen catchers. We're all supporting this guy in his pitch design. And then, once we got to spring training, he started working on it in the off season. We got to spring training, messing with grips and, having pitch design sessions. And once he got comfortable, he started using it in games. And there was a stretch where it was extremely helpful using that slider. And then he'd lose it for a little bit too, right? Because he pronates really well. He's a pronator, so getting a ball to move left is a challenge, but the gyro slider is absolutely something he can do. And we felt strongly about that. And, he got to show it off a little bit this year. Maybe we'll see a little bit more next.
We're talking to Brian Sweeney, Royals pitching coach, here with us. Very pleased to have him here in the Kaufman Corner. We'll get more into kind of the mix of pitchers. Also, outside hands working with the staff. You heard Brian reference that. First, we'll let you know we're brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized, full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear in KC since 1994. Don't risk accidents and liability in your parking lot. Get your lot restriped today. A brightly striped lot will cut down on accidents and keep your lot as safe as possible. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Brian, you mentioned earlier, different folks working with your guys. Like that's a, there was 15 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, that was kind of I don't want to say taboo, but there were like some organizations that are like, we don't want you working with these other guys. We have our program. We have our plan. We want you working on our plan. We want you on our throwing program. Long toss was a big thing there for a while, right? And some guys wanted it. Some guys didn't. Organizations would battle whether or not they've done it. I think everybody's evolved and recognized guys are, trying to get better and work at their craft. How do you manage, a guy's wants and interests and the different things that maybe have gotten him to where he is, especially, in today's game where guys come from different organizations, that he's at, a different facility in the off season or working with his own guys, agents, own people that have kind of their own pitching coach. How do you put all that together and make it work and make it harmonious with what it is, the vision that you and your staff and the organization has for them?
Yeah, you have two choices. You work together or you say no. And I think we all, think about that just in regular life, right? That, how that would work out. Do you want to be the, that jealous person that says, no, you can't go and do that? That doesn't usually work very well in life in general. There's great baseball people all around the country and all around the world, right? And it never hurts to get other coaches' eyes, on a player. And when facilities like Tread and Driveline, just to name a couple, there's plenty out there that have done such a great job. They want to help our players get better. I feel like we have to partner with them, and and say, yeah, let's do this together and communicate, right? And I think that's when it works the best, right? If you just if we just send them off with no communication, right, what good is that doing me if I don't know what's happening? But if I'm talking with Ben Brewster, at Tread about Kyle Wright, they work really well together. They have a connection, and I think that's great. I find out different cues that have worked for him. What does their throwing program look like? What comes down to is the best way to do it is to partner with the facility. They partner with us, and it makes for a better ball player. And I don't see it any other way.
So Brian, the introduction of just technology in general to the sport really over the last 10 years. I mean, it was analytics first, maybe in the 90s and 2000s. So really the last 10 years has been about using technology. And really on the pitching side, we've seen so much of this. It used to be thought that, you couldn't teach a pitcher how to throw harder, like velocity was just innate. And now, that their paradigm has completely changed there. And you have, Edgertronic to, slow-mo video to allow pitchers to look at exactly how their grip is affecting, the movement on the pitch, and, TrackMan data and all of that. I'm curious, like how important is it to stay on the bleeding edge of this stuff? Because like the technology is changing so quickly, and it seems like something that was best practices in the sport 5 years ago is like hopelessly outdated. And teams, there are certain teams that have a reputation for always being at the forefront. The Dodgers seem to always just find some guy and turn him into, like how important is it to keep up with what those other teams are doing and try and stay right at the edge, especially for a small market team where maybe you can't compete on payroll, but you can compete on making the pitchers you have the best they can be?
Yeah, sure. I think you need to, have some vision and see what's coming next. And, when you have, smart people around you, good baseball people, good people that are able to dig into the data and say, what, have we looked at this? Whether it's, the big thing, horizontal approach angle and vertical approach angle, looking at, how that can, affect how you build a repertoire, these things, everybody's eventually going to have it. Right. But, what's next? How can we sit down and discuss that and have some vision and find the next technology that's out there that we can use. It's challenging, right? Because we're every like you said, we're all looking for an edge. We're big market team or small, and these are things that we actively do in season when we have pitching meetings. There'll be some days where it's just, all right, we don't need to talk about players. Let's talk about the future. What do you see happening next? Right? Whether it's like, all right, the sinker's coming back, right? That's coming full circle again, right? It was 4-seam ride, north, south, right? That was the big thing. You had to have carry on your fastball. Don't ever throw a sinker. Well, here it is. The sinker's coming back, right? And it's everybody's a three fastball guy, right? If you have the 4, the 2, and the cut, right? So good luck if a starter has all of those. And of course, our guys, a lot of our guys do, but actively, being intentional about it and, talking about it, say, okay, what do you think's next? What technology can we use to help measure something that we're looking for? How can we get the third time through the order? How can we get the starters that way? Is there something different we can do? Right. So we actively have these discussions. Do we come up with a plan? No, well, not all the time. Right. It's good. It's good talk. But sometimes it's like, yeah, let's study this a little bit. And then, we go to Brandon Nelson, who's in the R&D department. He digs into it and says, I don't really know if this is going to work. We put this into our model, whether it's deception or we try to measure something like that. These are things that we try to actively have conversations about and, be at the forefront, of it.
Brian, I'm curious, where do you sit on changing pitchers' roles? Right, we mentioned Seth Lugo. He had an off season to turn himself into a starting pitcher, a whole spring training when he went out to San Diego. Chris Bubich is, it sounds like, based upon the comments of JJ Picola, was going to go into spring training looking at going back into the starting rotation. Do you have hey, yeah, we needed the off season to do it, or guys sometimes will come up in a reliever and then you're going to stretch them out and make them a starter? Do you have some hard and fast rules? Have you been through the data? Have you worked with R&D as to, we can change a guy's role once in a year, but we don't want to go once and then go back? Or are there any kind of parameters as to, how you go about changing somebody from starter to reliever and how often you can do that and what kind of wear and tear it puts on them?
Yeah. Take a peek at, who is it from Nick Martinez? Mm-hmm. Right. Just what he's done, and how he's done those things. Right. I was just at the Wake Forest, player development seminar in Winston-Salem. Right. And they talked about him and how he managed his workload. Right. And how he managed his workload objectively. And I think that's really important to pay attention to across the off season, spring training, in season. Right. It's, if you're just using a clicker and counting the innings, you're probably missing the boat on a few things. So, right. So, there's, we have a performance science department that helps us cover these things. And, then you use your experience in the game too, right? Back to the beginning of our conversation, right? You combine that experience with the innovation and you can come up with the best answer. So I don't think we have hard and fast rules on that. But there's certain guys what I've seen is the guys that embrace it really, really do well with that, where it doesn't phase them. They're typically guys that can throw, they don't get sore. They can throw each day. They know their bodies well. I'm glad you brought up Chris Bubich, right? What would you guys do with Chris Bubich, right? What's the, another guy that, was a starter,
right?
It's a tremendous year coming back after Tommy John, and was a huge piece of the puzzle in that bullpen, right?
You
is it
really want an answer on that, Brian?
I do.
Wow.
I know you're talking to me, but I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say.
I do have an answer for you. Being a guy that grabbed him for $1 in his fantasy baseball league last year and can keep him, I was projecting him to go back to the rotation when I got him there, and having a dollar starter with the kind of Ks per 9 he had, even if that comes down a little bit in the starting role, is extraordinarily valuable to Otto's Balls. The name of my fantasy team, by the way. So yeah, I'm thinking starting. If you're going to just open it up there, Brian, I'll throw my 2 cents in there. I love having a dollar starter. And
JJ, Soren said start. So we got another vote for start.
I will make my opinion known as somebody who does not have him for $1. And if I'm going to use more than my fantasy team's personal self-interest here, but I'm also on team starter. I mean, he's a lefty, multiple pitches. It was a very brief window. We saw him in 2023 before he got hurt, but I mean, we were anticipating him coming back for 18 months because he looked so good in that role. And, coming back from Tommy John, if that arm is healthy now, look, 180 or even 140 innings is generally going to be more valuable than 60 or 70, even if the per inning metrics may be a little better out of the bullpen.
They were pretty good innings out of that.
Yeah, they were, but they could be a little bit worse, and he could still be a lot more valuable, right, in that role. So we're team starter here.
Team starter. All right, I'm going to take that into consideration because I think you guys are thinking in a good light. A guy that wants to be a starter, right? And you also, when you think about it too, right? If it doesn't work out, you can always take a starter and that's been a reliever and put him in the pen. Right? You stretch a guy out, and you can do it. It's better to do it that way than to do it the other way. Like, he's a reliever, let's make him a starter and try to stretch him out in spring training, right? And as we see with the study that even came out, that came out today from Major League Baseball, a lot of the injuries happen early in the season. It's because of that ramp up, right? They're pushing a little too hard. So these are things that you have to pay attention to. Seth Lugo wanted to be a starter, right? He was a good reliever. You take the reins off, you let that guy be who he wants to be. We're gonna, I think, giving Chris that opportunity, he's earned that too.
Well, one last question for me, and I'm glad you brought up that study that came from Major League Baseball today about like how do we keep pitchers healthy, and like referring to the epidemic of pitcher injuries, because one of the things that really stood out, and it's not something we didn't already know, but it was kind of nice to see it laid out in a public document like this. But the correlation between velocity and injury risk, specifically elbow risk. So guys who throw more than 95 tend to get elbow injuries at a higher rate, but at the same time, guys who throw 95 tend to be more effective. Right. So I'm curious how you balance that. And I find it interesting that you guys targeted someone like Seth Lugo or even Wacha, who are effective pitchers without necessarily throwing the upper 90s. Now Lugo has one of the best spin rates on his curveball of any pitcher in baseball. But I'm curious, because so much of when we're talking about what's next, what's at the bleeding edge of analytics, just keeping pitchers healthy. That's something like the Dodgers and the Rays actually have not had great success with. They can extract maximum value from a pitcher, but then they get hurt. And one of the things, the thing I think that made the Royals so effective, so surprising this year, was you basically had 5 starters who never got hurt. You get 2 guys who got hit by line drives and missed a few starts, but otherwise they would have been able to start 162 games. That's almost unheard of in the modern game. So is there something that you guys are looking at with pitchers to try and keep them healthy in terms of maybe not throwing max effort every pitch?
Yeah, I think I have an email that I have to read from from Major League Baseball about this study, and it's a pretty long document that I received. I haven't read that. I read the Athletic article, and it is a problem, right? And what we've been doing hasn't worked, but pitchers have been getting hurt for a very long time, right? So it's at a more alarming rate now, right? And it's just across, as soon as a guy gets hurt, what's happening. I think you got to understand the individuals that you have on your team, understand who, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. I don't think it's just a guy that throws 95 miles an hour or more. I think there's more pieces to it. Right. You're never going to want to take these guys away from the game. That's what they train for. That's what they're out there to win. This is how they support their families. I'm never a proponent of saying, you know what, we're just gonna cut his game down by one inning, today. What is that, really going to do over the course of a season, unless you do it for 30 starts, right? These guys work really hard to go compete in the game, and for me to say, we're going to cut you back on this start unless there's something really, really happening with them, I think is irresponsible of me. We have to find other ways to manage this volume, and keep them healthy. And nobody's figured it out, or we all will would have done that by now. But I think managing what's happening in between those 4 days in between is really important, right? And using objective data to say, yes, this is when you can push, and no, we're not going to want to push today, whether it's in practice throws or game throws. At what intensity, we have to learn these things. We also have to understand the body of the individual, what profile they present, and keep them in that profile, and not have them do something that their body doesn't want to do. And if we pay attention to the details, I think we'll get closer to kind of, helping these guys stay healthy, and as I say all these things, right, this there's no concrete evidence, right, to say that this is what to do. But we're all working hard because we don't want to see, anybody get hurt. I think the last time 5 starters went all year was in Seattle, maybe 2001 or 2. I happened to be in the minor leagues at the time, and watching those guys just every 5th day posting up. That's the goal. Every starting rotation wants to do that. They just want to. They post up every 5th day. 33 starts, 34 starts, run, sprint through the playoffs. That's what they want to do. That's what they're supposed to do. And that's what they're training for, right? Looking at their training in the off season, and, kind of blending it all together. Hopefully you get a good holistic 360 look at the guy and say, okay, where do we pull back? Where do we push? Right. You can't not throw in between starts. Right. But if you can stay, you can keep them kind of in the light yellow, as we like to call it. You keep them there the whole time. You're going to put yourself in a better position to stay healthy. But granted, you might take a line drive off your navicular in your foot, and then you miss a little bit. But I'm excited that Major League Baseball is asking a lot of different people about how we can solve this pandemic. I think we're still years away from answers, but we're all trying to get better.
Yeah, and it's nice to know that there's the effort there, industry wide, to try and get it done. Brian, hey, thanks so much for your time. We kept you longer than we said we would. I apologize for that. But great insights. And let me just say again, congratulations. I know it always sucks when it ends. You always want it to go further. If you're not holding that trophy, there's big disappointment at the end. But what a fantastic season. It was great to rekindle the emotions and passion of the Royals fans. And you guys just had a fantastic season. We had a ball talking about you every week. So thanks so much for sharing some insights with us, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you down the road.
And Brian, if I could ask a very quick favor before you go, because you mentioned that last year Cole Ragans wasn't sure he'd make the opening day roster.
Yep.
Could you let him know that he's going to probably be on the opening day roster this coming year? I really don't want him to have that fear in spring training that his roster spot's in jeopardy.
I don't know. I think I might want him in that mindset, because that mindset made him pretty good this year. So I might bring it up. I'm sure Q is going to, because Q's got a perfect sense of humor for it. He's going to probably bring it up at one point and say something about it. But yeah, that's good.
Yeah, don't fix what ain't broke, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Last time. I like it. Brian, thanks so much. We appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you when you get back to Kansas City after spring training.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, you bet. There goes Brian Sweeney, Royals pitching coach. What a fantastic season he had. Of course, the organization had, and Rany, one of the things that really jumps out at me and it kind of struck me, I couldn't quantify it the first time I talked to him in Arizona when he first got the job, is he doesn't sound like the cliche baseball guys. Can I, and I don't mean that. I think there are a lot of guys in it. Listen, it's every sport has its own culture, and I run into it in football. There's the guy that has all the catchphrase. In football, it's, well, he plays well in space, and he uses all these cliches, and you have those things in baseball as well. He has an inquisitive mind, right? And I think you see that when you talk to him. Number one, there's a confidence level. I always appreciate somebody who will tell you something that they're trying to figure out or that they don't know. That is a sign of confidence, and I think he knows that he's a smart baseball guy, or he wouldn't phrase, the people who act like they know everything are the ones that are insecure and really are missing a lot of the information. And his inquisitive mind, and just when you ask him a question and he goes to another layer and another layer, he's mentioned guys got to get to know him. You can see where he's different than at least the guys I've been around. And maybe he's not different for the Cleveland organization or the Rays organization, the background for these guys, but you can see where he would click with people, because there's that, let's go try this. Let's go. And what about this? And the next level and the next level and the next level. And if you're a thinking pitcher, I would think where, he would just get you fired up to go, let's go see what we can figure out. Is that, he's different, in my opinion, than most of the people you talk to when you're, around a baseball organization.
100%. I mean, this is the first time I've talked to him in person, and obviously, he's not going to give away state secrets here, right? So he's got to be a little bit reserved in what he says. But the word that kept coming to my mind with hearing him talk is just what a great communicator he is. And you have to think, when he's talking, you can have all the great ideas in the world, but if you cannot impart that to the pitchers that you are in charge of, if you cannot convince them that you know what you're talking about, you can't convince them to be inquisitive, to share in that curiosity and to experiment. It's not going to work. And so this is something that, all the best organizations in baseball, which I'm hoping the Royals are starting to move that into that class. What they share is, obviously, they're interested in the data. They're interested in information. I don't like to use the word data because it sounds nerdy, right? Information. They are able to communicate. It doesn't matter how much information you have if you can't communicate. You have to be able to communicate it, and you have to have organizational buy-in, right? You have to have everybody in the organization working towards the same goal, right? There are teams, coaches out there that are great, but if they're in an organization that doesn't value their efforts, or they're being undermined or contradicted by somebody else, right, then the players are getting mixed messages. And the things he was talking about, the way he kind of described like Cole Ragans, and how many different people were involved, how many different departments were involved in the transformation of Cole Ragans into an ace. We're getting a glimpse of behind the scenes that, this is not something I'm used to. The Royals, they seem to know what they're doing. They have a plan. They are able to execute that plan. Everybody's on board with the plan, and they value the ability of projecting that plan and explaining that plan to the players they have, and the players are buying in. I mean, he talked about flying to Shreveport to have dinner, lunch with Seth Lugo and flying back, because you know what? Developing a rapport with your new pitcher months before spring training, that's important. It seems basic, but that's important stuff. We know he can do the data side. We know that he has, interest in what the TrackMan data is showing, but he also has an interest in getting to know these guys as people so that they have that confidence level. They can trust him.
What also jumped to me, and I think you make a great point. You mentioned working with the players, but working within the organization. You said all the people, and one of the names you said, Dr. Mack, right? Daniel Mack, who we've had on this podcast a couple of times. And, you hear Daniel Mack talk about, expanding his department, right? That's what we talked about. Remember, that was kind of the big takeaway we had when we talked to him going into last season. Right. But the connection to the guys in the uniform, right? Brian Sweeney wearing the uniform on the field with the guys, and there's that connection. It does seem like one of the things, everybody is bought in. It's not a couple of guys that believe in the information. It's the fact that, everybody is on the same page, and hey, you might be able to help me. Whatever it is you do in here, if there's something you can do that can help us, everybody's all in. And I think that's, you hear that in his voice, that all those layers of the organization are coming together and are all rowing in the same direction, right? I'm with you. Great communicator, and you see why he would click with the Seth Lugo. And by the way, the more success he has, the quicker
Exactly.
it'll be.
I was going to say,
right?
this can feed on itself. Now, if you're a pitcher coming to the organization today versus 2 years ago,
Yes.
you look at what they did last year, and he's like, hey, I have an idea, something you should try. A pitcher who's not willing to listen now is not paying attention to what's going on in the sport.
Yeah. I always talk about with Andy Reid, the tap the championship ring, and boy, that cuts through a lot of it. Well, I had a Cy Young finalist, in here. I got a guy who's, struck out 200 here. There are success stories that will immediately have people listening to what he has to say. And I'm with you. I think it just gets easier now to get the message across. Lots of work still to be done. I think the other thing that was interesting, I would love to know who the other names were. You said you start out in the offseason, you have a list of names you want to get, because it does seem like a lot of things fit together in the sense that with Wacha, with Lugo, with Ragans, with Singer, you had, and then throwing Alec Marsh, but particularly the four that they knew the answer, all different kind of guys, right? That's one of the things we hear about the Rays, different angles, different looks, different ways to do it. Did it just work out that way? Did they go extra to make sure they had a different look? I mean, did they actually push the number on Wacha by 3 or 4 million per because they're like, he's the guy that completes this rotation? Or is it a little bit of maybe the industry just kind of left different looks and different kinds of pitchers that made them thrive and all make them all better because it was a different look you were getting every night? I thought that was interesting. I've heard it referred that way in recruiting back in the days when you didn't write checks for recruiting, old school recruiting. I remember talking to Jim Boeheim, Bill Self, and Lorenzo Romar. We're all in Kansas City playing in a tournament. Billy Donovan couldn't be bothered, by the way. He was the one that was supposed to be there as well. But they were talking about recruiting, and they likened it to like fishing. Like, you put your bait out there. You're not really sure what's going to grab it, but you bring it into the boat, and then you kind of figure out how it all comes together. I wonder how much was targeted. We need these specific guys, and how much was they got them in the boat, and it ended up being a good connection. However they did it, it worked. Right? It worked really well.
I do wonder. I mean, I think the fit probably mattered, but I would like to think they probably also targeted guys who were thinking man's pitchers. I mean, Seth Lugo is like the classic example. I mean, he doesn't throw 98, but he throws like 11 different pitches. Like maybe they were attracted to a guy who was willing to not just use data, but also to tinker and experiment and, try to improve himself, as opposed to just somebody who threw like really hard, but like, didn't necessarily have understand the nuances of pitching. So I think that's part of it. The one other thing that I thought was interesting, kind of revealed, because he brought it up more than once when talking about trying to keep guys healthy, was he seemed to be making the point that one of the ways that they're trying to keep guys healthy is to, as they say, save their bullets. Like on off days, on rest days, in between, like they are tracking every single pitch these guys throw and making sure they're not throwing max effort any more than necessary. And it reminded me of something James Shields, when he came over to Kansas City. James Shields was not the best pitcher in baseball, but was one of the most durable pitchers in baseball for a long time, up till and through his tenure with the Royals. 220 innings that, even then was impressive. And one of the things James Shields would always talk about was like never throwing, any pitches in the bullpen on, the throw days in between starts without a purpose, like without, and never throwing it harder than necessary, saving that arm. There's only a certain number of bullets in that arm of yours. Saving them for the game. You still have to like practice. You still need to pitch in between, but don't pitch in such a way that it wears you out. And it just, listening to Brian today, it brought that to mind, that maybe that's one of the things. So clearly they hit on something. Maybe they got lucky this year, but man, they got 5 guys to throw 151 starts or something like that. And it would have been more if they hadn't got hit by a line drive. So maybe that's one of their secrets to their success. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they can maintain that next year.
Yeah, feel good a bit. He's the guy in charge, though, right? Of the pitching part of the equation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I felt good, obviously just based on the results, but talking to him, it's like, now I get why. Now I understand a little bit about how they're being successful. And I think it's replicable. Like it's something that hopefully they can sustain year after year.
We're always brought to you here on the Kaufman Corner podcast by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City metropolitan area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, locally owned, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. They also help us bring you the Kaufman Corner podcast. You can find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. If you own or manage a business and you've got any questions about your parking lot, let our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete help you out. Like I said, more than 30 years. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Happy holidays to everybody. We want to wish that to everybody out there. Enjoy some time with family and friends. And we'll be back at it next week with another edition of the Kaufman Corner podcast.